Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I just want to do a quick audio video check, making sure you can see my screen. Just use the chat function and I'll let you know. Appreciated. All right, looks like we're good to go. Okay, so let's get started. So we changed up the format. We're doing 30-minute webinars. I'm going to try that out. I think that's a little better for you all and your time, and then we could always go back to the 1 hour as we had done in the past. Today we're going to be talking about tools do the work, but workflows make the money. And really we're going to try to articulate how you can make more money and give you some advice, and then how that ties into some of the things that Infrascale has been doing. My name is Derek Wood. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing here. A lot of you may know me and you've worked with me before, so nice to see you all on here. Hey, Bob. We're going to go through just an overview, how to improve your workflows and how we're helping you make more money with less effort. And then I'll go through and announce some changes that have come up recently, and those will also be some items that I think you'll all be excited to see. So first, just define what a tool versus a workflow. A workflow is what describes all the required work, tools, and resources to deliver some sort of value to the organization or to your customers, or both. The tools would be a component of that. And tools in and of themselves have micro workflows. That's why we talk about user experience or ease of use when we're using a piece of software. The big thing with workflows is that it's not as immediately clear how that's impacting your bottom line. It also is very helpful when you're looking at ways to differentiate yourself. There's only so many services out there. A lot of them are very similar, but the way in which you deliver your services from start to finish, from prospecting to delivering services and ongoing relationships, can be the difference between getting a customer and not. For example, I just went through a bidding process to get my basement refinished, and I'm a software guy. If there's no keyboard on it, I'm not really that interested in building it myself. A couple of the bidders all came out with a process, and the first three kind of went through their deal. They did a bit of a walkthrough, some measurements, and then they went away and they were going to send out some other people to come take a look. So a couple of weeks would go by before we would get any type of a quote, and even those quotes are very much estimates with a pretty decent margin of error. But then I had one firm come in, and the day they were there, they spent about as much time as everyone else did, except by the time I left, they actually had emailed me a PDF of the layout that we customized right there on his laptop, and he gave me a quote which ended up being the same margin of variance as all the other quotes, except the way that his workflow was designed was much nicer for me as a buyer. It made me feel comfortable. I kind of trusted that they knew what they were doing, and it was just a really nice experience. So that's just one recent anecdotal example of how workflow can be the difference between the sale and not the sale. So why better workflows? Really you're talking about reducing those operational costs that are costing you money and improving efficiency. So the efficiency improvement is what makes your business more scalable. Can you serve more customers with the same staff, or do you have a staff-to-customer ratio that you're kind of stuck with? Over the last 10 years or so working in the IT service market, I've found that a lot of companies kind of reach a roadblock in their growth, and it comes down to scalability. They need more money to hire more staff, but they need more customers to hire, or more staff to get more customers, but they need more customers first before they can hire more staff. One of the ways to get through that chicken or egg scenario is to simply improve the efficiency with the staff that you currently have. And there's always room for improvement. The big thing here is you don't need to be an expert. You do need to be disciplined. You don't need to change everything at once. And one thing that I learned was the concept of an end task indicator. And any of you who have a formal project management background, this is rather fundamental for you. But when I ran my first operation, I didn't know the difference between operations, project management, even product management. I kind of just jumped in with both feet and hoped for the best. And just by being disciplined and taking one step at a time with incremental improvements, I was able to find some very significant changes. And I have an excerpt of one of the work breakdown structures that I put together here. And then I also borrowed and learned a lot from people who had done it before me. And I have some references to talk through. But really the whole concept is that efficiency in workflows and process is something that never changes. I have this quote from Abraham Lincoln here about, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. How do you make each swing more effective? There's another anecdote that we use internally here all the time about, the story of the man out chopping wood and takes him a week and you figure out, oh yeah, it's because he's got a dull axe. He could have gotten the job done, but he said, I don't have the time. The discipline that we found is just to be consistent. You don't have to hire a full-time body if you can commit to a small amount of your time every month to just working on improving the way that you're delivering services to your customers or the way that you're operating internally. As long as you're being consistent, that's okay. If we were to categorize and do a planning like you do with a development team, we actually have just a bucket of effort that we don't calculate in our total development team's bandwidth. So if they can do 50 units of work per month, we'll take 15% of that and just remove it. So we'll just say, okay, they can't do 50 isn't the number we're planning around. We're planning around 35 and then 40, whatever that number is. And then that way we never have to argue with something that obviously has a long-term impact versus something that has a short-term impact, because this continual sharpening of the axe is very important. You can even try this with yourself. You don't have a development team. Try this just by with an office space or your house if you have trouble cleaning. If you just make a rule of consistently picking up one thing in every room that you enter throughout the day, and you're intentional about the things that you're doing, meaning there's a reason, it's not arbitrary, and you don't create new messes, just with these 3 simple rules, you'll find that within a week or so, assuming that other people aren't breaking your rules for you, you'll have a clean place. And you didn't have to spend half a day doing a purge clean. So this type of principle is really for keeping a clean house, whether you're talking about your business, your operations, or how you're delivering to your customers. The important part is really to be consistent and stick and disciplined to stick to it. Don't push off this work for other items, and that takes a lot of discipline. It comes up every couple of months still. At least in the early days, it took a couple of months for us to stop even questioning whether or not we could use some of that effort to sharpen our axes to do some other work. So stay consistent, be intentional, so make a plan, and then don't create new problems for yourself. Now, what can help you? I put in the PMBOK, which is the Project Management Book of Knowledge, international body. I actually took I think it was a 6-week course at a nearby university, and I found that for the most part I was moving in the right direction. But then I learned a couple of things like end task indicators, better formatting for a formal work breakdown structure, these sorts of formal things that have really been developed over time by thousands and thousands of people who have done this before us. Agile is great in a methodology for keeping things regular and consistent. And then Six Sigma, of course, is kind of the gold standard for process efficiency, but you don't need that. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to use what's important and get rid of the rest. I've gone through a lot of onboarding of teams that come from different methodologies, waterfall, or even just no methodology, and bringing them into an agile framework. And one of the first problems we always run into is, oh, there's so many rules. These are not rules. These are all guidelines. Pick and choose what makes sense for you to use and get rid of the rest. One of the fundamentals of Six Sigma and all these things is to always question why you're doing something. If it's not adding value, just stop it. And that also takes a lot of discipline. But I would recommend looking into these for anyone who's going to go down the line of trying to work on better process improvement. And frankly, I'm a big fan of agile process as it can apply to just about any scenario. So where do you start? So, okay, we have, hundreds of services, and we have, 100 clients, and we're trying to onboard. Where do we get started? Sometimes looking at a system is overwhelming just because of all the components in it. So the first thing is just to start breaking it down into individual components. For services, I like to break it down based on addressable market and margin. And you start kind of plotting where your services are. And this gives you a good idea of, one, things that you need to reevaluate. So anything in this risky quadrant where you're not making a lot of margin, there are very few customers or prospective customers that even need that service, that is certainly in line for reevaluation. Do you even need to continue? Or not do you need, but should you? Is that actually hurting your business? And that was a very common problem in the early managed service days when everyone was moving from a break-fix model to a managed service model. If you could plot your customers on a similar type of chart, and break-fix customers are very low margin and they're risky. And it's difficult to turn business away at first, but you will find that getting rid of or limiting your exposure down here in the risky section is critical. So if you can't move this risky item to be more applicable to other businesses or to be higher margin, then your other option would be maybe we don't do it anymore. What you're really looking for are, I would start with your core services. If you have the higher addressable market, that means it's also probably going to take a bigger toll on your ongoing operations, support, monitoring, reporting, all this sort of thing. So that is going to have a higher impact if you were to increase some efficiencies with things with a higher addressable market. So can you move any of these services up a little bit to increase your margin? And that's going to be a really good starting point. The niche services are also in that line. The niche service may very well be a differentiator for you. Maybe it's a industry-specific type of service. So you don't have a lot of clients on it, but the margin's pretty good. And for niche services, you can usually get pretty good margin because it's not that common, kind of supply-demand deal. And then, of course, you have your ideal services. What are things that everyone needs? And of course, increasing margin for any service is always a good thing. But these would be the services that you'd really look to expand. And once your operations are a little more effective, maybe a more effective and scalable operation will allow you to truly expand how you've sold these ideal services to the rest of your customer base. It allows you more flexibility in how you package services. It may even change your offer strategy. Instead of coming in like a couple of those bidders did with me, or they came in, they evaluated everything, and then they wanted to send a specialist for drywall and flooring and ceiling and HVAC and all this stuff. Maybe it was just enough to start it off with one person there, and then you have the operations in place where your margin or your margin of error on that initial is going to be pretty low. or the same as if sending out all those people. You know, how can you simplify the buying cycle for these ideal services, so you get more flexibility. So this is an excerpt of how I document it, and this is straight out of the book. So minding the store, especially when it comes to operations, oftentimes these are things that, you know, they're not going to always be currently documented or up to date, because it does take time to document things. But in the long run, it's more expensive to not document it, because it'll be hard to calculate your margins. You know, when you're looking at your end-year reports, it may be different. You know, if all of your margin analysis is just based off of the hard cost of a service and you don't incorporate the time to deliver and time to onboard, that can be difficult. And a lot of you that have ConnectWise, you have your hours in there as far as project work, and that's good. The support may also be tied in, and that is terrific. But you really got to make sure that all these things are a part of it. And if you have it in a workflow in ConnectWise or Salesforce or whatever tool you're using, that's good, as long as it gives you a way to really take it all in and see where you can make some efficiencies. And the process is really the same. It's just, you know, document, measure, whether, you know, some sort of quantification, whether that's time or effort in a Scrum sense, some sort of measurement. You evaluate what's going on, talk to your team, see where you can combine some steps, simplify some things, implement changes, and then see how those changes went. And then you repeat and you start over. And you can do this incrementally, and over time you can make really significant improvements. So for example, when I took over this operation and I had no idea what I was doing, all I knew was that one step was a bunch of customers would send us their logos and some text, and they send an email off to this team, and then 4 to 6 months later, a fully white labeled piece of software would pop out of the other side. And the first step was I had to understand what was going on. So I just spent time figuring out what was being done in that process that hadn't been documented. I started putting together some sort of measurement for what it took to get those things done. And over time, just started eliminating unnecessary steps, creating better systems. The big thing was end task indicators. The previous operation didn't have a very reliable set of end task indicators, which meant that projects would get stuck for no reason other than nobody knew they needed the next step. Another anecdote, we submitted plans to the city to get approved. They didn't like my kitchen, so I pulled it out and resubmitted, and then we didn't hear anything for weeks and kept following up. Well, it turned out that there was a checkbox missed somewhere, something pretty insignificant for us, and they just threw out the whole report. But there was no end task indication to me or to them internally that this is what happened. Otherwise, they probably would have been able to tell us within the first week or two of following up that, oh, you missed this. So operationally, you know, this concept of an end task indicator seems kind of weird, or at least it did. I remember it feeling very strange to me at first, but it really turned around everything. The delays in projects went away completely just by doing that. So the first big change was instead of 4 to 6 months for a delivery, the variance was a couple of days. So it was just 4 months. By the end of, I believe it was about maybe 6 months of continuing to remove steps that weren't necessary, change the way we were doing things, we actually reduced the delivery time to 2 days, 2 business days from 4 months. And at the same time, I quadrupled the deliverables. And I didn't have to expand my team at all. So I started with 4 guys, I ended with 4 guys, but at the end of it, just by minding the store and some basic operations management work, I was able to increase how many of these customers we were able to serve on a regular basis and increase the value we were delivering to them while decreasing the time it took for us to actually do it. And that's huge for any service or program that you have. And again, you really don't need to be an expert. I'm still not an expert. I'm not a certified project manager or Six Sigma green belt or black belt. But understanding these principles is not that tough. A lot of it's pretty logical. But when you go through those frameworks, you'll find that they have some very useful tools and reporting structures that you probably would eventually get to, but not for a long while. And that's what I found, is that the reporting structure and how to document things was really quite helpful. And of course, Visio is my best friend. So a Visio on everything. So now I'm going to get into the last 10 minutes how this applies to Infrascale and some of the stuff that we've changed. So Infrascale, we're really committed to building good tech, right? We're a technology company. And we're also committed to building it for the channel. That's why a lot of our development isn't even for backups software. It's for management of customers. It's a lot of the effort we put into is for marketing programs like we do with SMB Nation offer. So these are some of the things from a product perspective that we're trying to help you out. So backup and DR is a good starting point because it's a core service. Any business with a IT infrastructure needs to have a backup and or DR plan. So it has a large addressable market. But the problem with traditional backup and DR is that delivering those services is usually pretty low margin. So you have something that everyone needs, but you're not making a whole lot of money on it. So what are some ways that you can improve that? One of the cons is testing and backup processes are very elongated. We used to have partners that would spend maybe 5,000 or 6,000 man hours to run a single DR test, or $5,000 or $6,000 worth of man hours just to run a single DR test for the customer. And that's something that the customer just expects. They just expect it to work. It's going to be hard to get them to pay for that. So that's tough. You may require multiple vendors for a full solution. So providing a full end-to-end backup and DR plan is going to be costly just by nature of having multiple vendors, multiple systems, multiple rules and workflows to train and keep up on. The other con, and this is not much of a con and more of a kind of an asterisk when you're looking at sheets as far as integrations. Integrations are not all same. Same being a fun term I picked up on a vacation in Thailand and shopping for knockoffs. It's not all same. Integration is a very broad thing to talk about, and it could be as simple as, oh yeah, we have email-based alerts that trigger a ticket in your system. Sure, that certainly checks the box for integration, but does it integrate in a way that really impacts your workflow so that your team delivering the services and doing the ongoing monitoring and management are saving time doing it? That's where where you're really looking at the integration. And we've been doing a lot of work this last year with ConnectWise on that. So the piecemeal solution, you may need multiple vendors for workstations, mobile remote servers. You're all partners, so I'm not going to spend too much on it. And a lot of times that means that some areas are left exposed. One of the things that we've had available, and we have a new promotion going out today, is our Infrascale Cloud Application Backup. It allows you to now protect hosted Office 365, SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, Salesforce, Box, these tools that are being used more and more commonly today. And maybe you need a separate vendor. Well, now you don't. You can it's all under Infrascale. So the new comprehensive data system recovery now includes this third bucket of cloud applications. And this is something that we found great success. So we've run a couple of pilots with a few of our partners, and we've found nothing but great success. The promotional offer right now is that it's 60 days free for hosted Exchange backup through Office 365. So you can set up the Exchange backup, run it for 2 months at no cost to you or your customer. So you could either start charging them and just have a little bonus cash, or it just makes what we found is a opt-in sales program much easier. So in a couple of the betas and the pilots that we ran, our partners just enabled the cloud application backup for all of their customers using Office 365 Exchange. And then once they enabled it on day one, they started a campaign with their sales reps to go out and talk to these customers about the service, what it's doing, showing them the reports, and then to say, hey, so we've been protecting your hosted application this whole time, but it's now time to pay or we got to turn it off. What would you like to do? And we were seeing conversion rates, even in an opt-in campaign, or as much as 60%. And now I don't think that's going to be, that might have been an anomaly, but because you typically don't plan for campaigns to be that successful, but I'll talk a bit about it more. The other thing is, testing. Testing is a huge part of providing a backup and DR service. Anyone who was doing backup and DR back in the tape days, it's probably ingrained to your brain that if you don't test it, then it's not backed up because of the failure rates that tape systems have. But today we're talking about not just testing, can you get data back, which most systems are pretty good about doing now. Now it's about being able to prove to your customers what the total downtime risk is. If everything goes off or only some things go off, how long before you get it back up and running? Well, it's hard to put a number to that, and it'd be expensive to constantly validate that with a traditional system. With the drag and drop orchestration that we've built in, you can make this testing rather simple. We've also released this last summer, for those of you who have seen it, and it's also on our blog, an updated email verification. So you can actually schedule cloud boot tests for specific machines if there's very critical machines or roles, and it'll email a screenshot of the machine running to verify that this is being tested on a regular basis. So you don't have to go through a full boot orchestration test every time, which is still pretty low. You just come in here and hit run, and then it starts initiating your recovery, and you've already predetermined the order. So it's a lot of time saved in general, but if it's one particular machine, it's even easier. It's just a scheduled test and an email with a screenshot attached to it. So that helps quite a bit. When you make this change, all of a sudden you see your margins start to increase. Backup testing is very costly, even though the benefit's very high. The relationship between cost and benefit is fairly even. With DR testing, because of the simplification of boot orchestration and an email verification, you can actually get the same high value, but for a much lower cost. And that's much better for how you're packaging and positioning the services. That could be a differentiator, even against somebody using a similar tool. Okay, so back to Cloud Application Backup. I just wanted to show you this. And this is available for download if you go to prc.infrascale.com. There's a product sheet up in the portal, so you can take a look at it. Talk to your account manager about the 60-day trial for Exchange Backup. This is something that a lot of businesses, we surveyed, many of you even responded, so thank you for that. Not a lot of people have solutions for this. There's still very much a conception that if it's hosted, that I don't have to worry about all that stuff. But hosted Exchange, Office 365, it's not designed for backup. And you don't have the retention you need for compliance. And if you do, it's very expensive, especially compared to this. And this also lets you have this protection under a single vendor rather than another option. So go talk to your partner specialist about that. And then quickly, the ConnectWise integration. So those of you using ConnectWise, I've done a lot of deliveries this year, and a lot of you have actually been working with us to help build out those requirements. So again, it's all about reducing costs, improving your efficiencies. So ConnectWise Manage and Automate are both integrated with ICB and IDR, and that's for and also with ICAP for the managed part. Some of the things that we've changed is we've added some steps where when you need to troubleshoot stuff, the unique device identifier is actually right there visible within the ConnectWise interface. That way you don't have to go searching for it in another system. So we've done a lot of work to ensure that you don't have to double enter between ConnectWise and Infrascale systems, and that you have to leave the ConnectWise system quite rarely. We kind of put the 80-20 rule. 80% of the work into doing ConnectWise with Infrascale you can do from the ConnectWise interface, and that's really helpful when it comes to knowing what your login is for the Infrascale dashboard. Just new steps, new workflows that you don't need as much. So we're simplifying the experience for our partners using ConnectWise by really going deep in our integration with both ConnectWise Manage and Automate. So this includes mass deployment. You can set up and install during ConnectWise agent onboarding, direct access from the dashboard, so you don't need to leave and have your login handy. Streamline troubleshooting, and then of course all the service alerts and customized workflows you can build out from there. And this integration is really important because if you're using ConnectWise or an APSA, that's the core of your business, and that's where you want to try to push all of your workflows. You want to try to get all your services contained in one area, because that's going to reduce risk of delays, mistakes, errors, and it's going to reduce the time. And I think I'll throw it up for questions. Ooh, 30 minutes went by quick. Any questions for me today? Okay, this is some questions come in. And one question: Do you recommend Agile over project management, or what would you recommend? To keep it low effort. Again, you don't need to go out and get certified. There's free content about project management. I think the PMBOK book is maybe like $60 or $70. You can get the Agile Manifesto for free. Agile is more of a framework for coordinating with the team and keeping things regular and consistent. And then you're going to find the PMBOK to be much more helpful when it comes to how to document your workflows and keep your projects in line, as well as your operations. Six Sigma, of course, there's going to be more dollars behind it, but that's the whole point. I would just start with project management, open knowledge, and some basic Agile frameworks. Look on YouTube. Really, you just need to break out an Excel sheet and start documenting the steps people take to get things done. Use Visio for a bigger overview, and then you'll be able to start eliminating stuff that's not necessary. Ask your team. Your team's going to self-diagnose better than anyone else probably. They could probably tell you, like, oh, if I could just do this, I'll save a lot of time. Let that be the case. Good question. So yeah, I don't think there's a proper order here. I would just start looking into probably Agile and PMBOK. You can always give us a call too if you want to talk about it. All right, so that'll shore it up for us today. Give a call to your account managers. They're all going to be put out in a campaign. This 60-day free offer for the Exchange backup is something we haven't pushed out in mass yet. You all are the first ones to hear about it exclusively right here, today's webinar. So go talk to them about it and how you want to put a plan to operate it. You could be as simple as just you turn it on for customers you want. It's already available in the dashboard, and that's it. We found great success with that pilot I described where they rolled it out to all of their customers. They also had the administrative rights to do so, and then worked on a 2-month campaign to see if the customers wanted to keep it or not, and then to go from there. So it really just depends on your administrative rights as well as how you're set up to contact people. All right, thank you, and have a good one.